Hello, everybody. This is Doug Baker at FMI. I appreciate you joining us today for this webinar to get to know a little bit more about the work that FMI is doing with Saber Space. Before I hand it over to Jim Morantz, I just wanted to just a quick update. Don't want to assume that everybody on this call knows who FMI is. So just want to spend a little bit of time talking to you a little bit about who we are real quick. As a grocery retail and product supplier, trade association with members across North America and around the world. As you can see there, we have 70 countries, 260 companies, and by extension, they're trading partners. We have over 400 associate members. So think of us as sort of your voice in Washington on all regulatory and legislative activities. Chad, next slide. We also have a number of committees and councils that we pull together. They're voluntary committees and councils across the industry, across a number of different topics. So you can see from here everywhere from consumer and community affairs to food safety defense to private brands to technology. And many of those communities and councils also help us with our events. We run 12 events throughout the course of the year. Something that's relatively new and why we're having this conversation today is with the help of my partner across the table here, Chad Ross. We've been actively working on supply chain resilience. And for probably the last 2 years, been working very closely with FEMA and a number of stakeholders in the industry to try and help improve communication between the private and public sector, and also create a tool or resource that can develop a better line of sight. So there's a few things that our industry as well as the government, the private sector needs, and some of the challenges were there was no strong way or seamless way of communicating what those needs were back and forth. So at the end of the day, from a federal standpoint, FEMA just needs to understand what kind of situation we're in, and that is pre and post. So what are our needs if we see a Dorian barreling down on the southeast? What are our needs? Do we have any from generator support, trucks, water? What are those types of needs that we might need help? And to the extent that we can't take care of those with mutual aid within our own industry, they want to be there to help provide that. FEMA has somewhat of a motto as do no harm, and so their purpose of that is to understand where we're at and where we're doing well so they can go where we can't be or where we're not doing well. Additionally, you know, from an industry, we want to make sure that our stores get up and running as quickly as possible. When you see commerce coming back up and people are able to start taking care of themselves again is when their lives start to get back to normal. And after such a major event, that's important to get a community back up on its feet as quickly as possible. And both FEMA and state want to help support that. So working with Sabre, who has a number of our members already involved, which was one of the benefits to us partnering with Sabre is that we have a few members, retail members across the country that had started, or you could say were like founding companies within Sabre. So they had created a platform with these guys in mind, which made it really simple for us to just extend this across the industry and create that one-point solution for FEMA and state EOCs to be able to gather information about what's going on in our food supply chain. So as you can see from the image up there, and Jim's going to go into a much more detail, our purpose here for partnering with Sabre is to do that. It's to give the public sector the information that they need to be of assistance, to not run into each other, and to allow us to get back up and running and taking care of our communities and doing what we do well, and that is moving food through the supply chain. So with no further ado, I want to hand it over to Jim Morantz. He's the Executive Director of Sabre, and he's going to walk you guys through what Sabre is and a little bit of a look at how Sabre was activated during Dorian. Jim, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks very much, Doug, and appreciate your time, everyone. looking forward to expanding our connections with the food business area. Sabre was created by an organizing group that included some of, as Doug said, some of the members, Target and Walmart, Macy's, Costco, Lowe's. You see the ones down at the bottom there. They were the origin of Sabre, which began by a gentleman in the state of Florida who was the public sector liaison, calling me up because I had worked on the technology that sits behind Sabre, this product called Exchange Core, for the Department of Homeland Security. He called up and said he had a problem, and that was that when a hurricane was working its way up Florida, he had a list of 50 companies that he called at least once a day to find out their status of their stores, whether they need anything, exactly what Doug just described. I said we can deal with that because we have this very interesting technology that we've developed for DHS. And he said, well, let's start talking. So he pulled together a small group, and it was a gentleman from Walmart who said, Florida has an interesting problem. Mine's the flip side of that, though. When a hurricane is working its way up the coast, there are 1,000 different phone calls that I have to field from governments who want to know what's happening with our business. So it's a different scale, different problem, but same side of the coin. And that coin now is represented by Sabre in the center there. And the goal of Sabre is to bring that business status to government as well as back to the private sector for the purpose of influencing government recovery priorities. That was the first job. A couple of years into it, we added this part to the mission to enable business-to-business collaboration, that mutual aid that Doug was just talking about, by providing accurate and timely business status, with our whole purpose to get businesses back in business faster. Sabre as an organization is a nonprofit, and we're strictly dedicated to keeping a business open longer and reopening faster. It's a clearinghouse for information, and we provide that key information to government to help set those community priorities. FEMA over last year has begun to organize its thinking into what they call lifelines, and we focus on 3 of those areas: food, water, sheltering, energy, particularly the fuel side, and health and medical, particularly pharmacies, because they represent our members at the present time. And then bottom line, and it is the bottom line here, there's no cost to businesses to provide this information. And equally, there's no cost to governments or voluntary agencies or other companies to consume the information. We're supported by a number of different grants and projects, currently by the Department of Homeland Security, on one that is extending our technologies. When FMI was brought to Sabre by FEMA, who said, gee, we've been getting this information from Sabre for 4 or 5 years now, could we work on the food side? The goal really was to improve this public-private food partnership. And you do that by creating visibility of the business operational status. If you do that, you're going to build more of a shared responsibility to provide food support to the communities. Shared meaning government may need to step in. Our preference always is that other companies step in to support those areas that are in need. Creating that visibility is also going to make the roles clearer so that we understand where the private sector and where the public sector best play in a plan, and then also by understanding what's going on, how you modify that plan to make it most effective during the emergency. And the phrase that FMI has used here is the clear line of sight. And the first phrase, it's nothing that surprises anybody. The public sector can be a bull in a china shop when it comes to a disaster. And for the private sector, there can be breakdowns that involve information silos, operational silos, and this visibility of business operational status helps to remove those roadblocks, and we have seen remove frustration of dealing in the emergency period. So what's Sabre? It's a technology that supports that organization that I described a few minutes ago, and the whole goal is to be able to share. In this case, Sabre uses the technology to share business status. Our first requirement working in the corporate world is you have to be flexible. So we have 3 different ways that you can bring this Sabre business status into Sabre. The first way is a fully automated connection. And working with a couple of companies on that, Walmart's our leader in that area. And later on, we may see some Walmart stores that are closed when we switch into a live view of what I'm talking about. The second way is a spreadsheet. And it turns out some of the largest companies in the world, when they have a disaster, they're managing it from a spreadsheet. And twice a day, that spreadsheet gets sent up to the CEO offering their business status. So the structure of Sabre and where the success came in was that information sharing technology in the middle is flexible enough for us to be able to say to a company, don't change anything. Put Sabre as a CC on the email to the CEO, and we'll get your information in. Technology needs to drive rather than having companies need to drive rather than having the technology drive what companies do. And the third way we've teamed with a company called Spot On Response to do a mobile app that now extends what Sabre can do in supporting on a commercial subscription basis a wide range of business emergency capabilities and provides information into Sabre. So flexible input. Whole reason for that, and the other side of it is we have to be flexible on the output also. And that's where the technology comes in, because it's able to take any of those forms of information coming in on the left-hand side, process it in multiple ways, 5, 6, 7 different ways, to make certain that we can satisfy the needs of everybody on the right-hand side. Because, and this is a really important point, for both companies as well as for the governments, you don't want to make them go look at something new. We want to take Sabre and put that information into the software they're already using so the data becomes more valuable by being integrated with what they use every day. So most important, that phrase in the middle, Sabre is status data. What you do with the data is entirely up to you. We're the provider of that data. And we multiply the value of that data. That spreadsheet goes from being a list that is perhaps decipherable by the company because they know all those stores. When handed off to a government agency, whether a local or another, what they're going to do is quickly look down there and say, all these things are in Louisiana. That's the best I'm going to know about this spreadsheet. Is we got a bunch of stuff closed in Louisiana. They need more in order to make those key decisions that Doug and I have mentioned are the basis for emergency response. So, spreadsheets. You see the companies up there. In the few weeks that we've been working with FMI, these companies are now providers of this information. They upload and are learning to upload their spreadsheets, and all of this is being improved and pushed forward by a Department of Homeland Security project that's helping us focus on all of the business needs in order to magnify value. So that spreadsheet, that data, goes through Sabre, gets turned into data that is then consumed by a whole range of different things. And some of many of these are real. I mean, Hurricane Barry, we just saw that coming through there. Down the bottom on the center there, that is Spot On Response with the Hurricane Barry information. Hurricane Irma on the left-hand side, that's an ArcGIS online. I'll throw out these names. You may or may not know any of the software. Over in the bottom right-hand corner, even a free copy of Google Earth. We have formats that can bring that in, and I have personally been on the phone with the local government during an emergency, and within 5 minutes, we had Google Earth downloaded with the Sabre data in it. That is what we consider to be a real success story. Arizona, Georgia, Florida, all of the central United States, many of these states, and we'll talk about this in a little bit later, but key point being, Sabre is the data, and these are the consumers of the data who depict it in ways that is most beneficial to them. In operations, it's used like this. Here, this is in the Kentucky Emergency Operations Center during an exercise just a couple months ago. Sabre was simulating the closure of 4,300 some locations in that earthquake zone. Other dynamic tools that you see down at the bottom. In the upper right-hand corner, the Saber Status Map, always available to you to go onto saberspace.org, look at the status map, and be able to see what's happening. That's how it's used in operational view, but it's also used for analysis. The data that comes in there, there's reports that are done with tabular over multiple days, what type of losses are occurring in which type of industries, problems, whether these are structural damage or just need some repairs, whether there's a utility problem or whether there's customers can't get in. Those are that's the kind of information that we collect. And then over the right-hand side, the kind of narrative, and this actually was out of Hurricane Dorian just a couple of weeks ago. Throughout that event, we monitored, it says 3,400, I forget which day this was, but it pushed over 4,000 different business locations from Miami all the way up to the North Carolina-Virginia border. Some of the information there, 17% of the stores being monitored in that coastal area in Florida were closed at that point. An observation that most of the closures were big box stores and chain stores, many of them coastal and being evacuated. But we discovered an interesting observation that smaller stores, food services, convenience, grocery stores like you, with fewer employees had more flexibility. And they did not feel as at risk needing to close longer in advance. They could wait while the potential impact was able to unfold. So it's that kind of resources that we provide out to federal, state, local government agencies. And here's just a couple pictures out of Hurricane Dorian, and you see the kinds of things that organizations do. Here, upper right-hand corner, that's the free copy of Google Earth. The Sabre mobile app is there. Upper left-hand corner is spot-on response. And in the middle, that's the state of Georgia. They have built this wonderful, beautiful tool all around using the Sabre data and able to categorize by types of stores that are closed and show the location and relate the hurricane to it. So that's some of the wonderful things that business and government organizations are doing with the data. And who are they? Well, it's got a pretty good coverage now. Every one of the red ones is a state agency or business emergency operations center and cities and counties in there. So getting some pretty good coverage there. 14 federal departments and agencies. The blue ones are where we don't have a state but have cities and counties. And about 60 private sector organizations are now providers of information. So when you support this and provide status information, it's going to whoever is affected by the emergency pretty much across the United States. So what is this stuff that we're sharing? Well, there's very little that's required. We can provide adequate and useful status information with just the ones that are in red, the company name, an address and location, and the status. And early on, many companies, that's all they gave us. We had opened up the opportunity to give lots of other information. All this information has been developed over the last 2 years in a project that we call Business Status Reporting Best Practices. And we surveyed many companies, government agencies to determine what's useful during this period of time. So that's what all those categories are. The ones that are in yellow are the ones that FMI's Risk Management, Emergency Management Advisory Group has said they want you to do. So a requirement is the 3 in red. That's all, really little. A request from FMI are the ones in yellow. And a benefit to everyone are the ones in white. So you see the kind of information. It's related to the event, the impact itself, description, damage to the facility, things like that, as well as problems that need to be overcome. You're having a problem with employee availability. Well, why is that? Well, they're all evacuated. Okay. Maybe if we can get them back sooner, you open up sooner. You're having a problem with customers getting to stores. Well, there's road debris out in front of your street. Well, that's a problem for a local government. But if 3 businesses say, hey, we got that road debris and we're all ready to open if you get that out, maybe somebody moves the tree branches out of the way. So that idea of understanding the problems in order to provide back for government at all levels through Sabre is one of the ways that we have seen businesses get back in business faster. It's easy to onboard, and I'm not going to go through these steps because I'm going to do one for you, and because it only takes a couple of minutes. Going to go to the Saberspace website, fill out a application. You're going to download a blank spreadsheet that you put your business locations into. That comes back to Sabre. We add that additional information that FMI is recommending that you provide and put that into the system for you. Hopefully, months down the line, when something happens, all you need to do is go in and use a series of drop-downs. You're illustrating all of your business locations are open. Hey, you got something that's going to be closed. You just have to go to the drop-down and change that. Many of those other fields have categories that are in drop-down lists to make them very easy. Others are narratives that you can add your own information to. It's a very quick process. We're going to do that and take a look at it as part of a show coming up shortly. You finish it, you save it, and go to your name, upload button on the Saberspace member login site, and you're going to go through and add that information in with your username and password to be able to provide the information and then share it out to all those different kinds of applications that you saw earlier. So what's that accomplish? Well, it depends on who you are. For government, they rely on pretty straightforward Saber Status Map saying what's closed. And that is the heart of Sabre itself, is what's closed first. Secondly, what problems are there. So thirdly, we can fix those problems by prioritizing business recovery for businesses to get everybody back in business faster. If you're FMI and you're called upon by FEMA to say what's happening in food, it's that visibility into the national food supply chain. And that's really your, as FMI members, that's your direct link into supporting the FMI mission to work with FEMA. So that visibility into the national food supply chain is part of a second application that is FMI both open and closed, because government wants to know what's closed because they want to fix it. FMI wants to know what's open and closed so they can see how the food supply chain is working. With an underlying purpose is that you don't end up with some government food distribution center on your doorstep. So there's a self-interest in sharing this information. And then the third thing, a company can improve their business intelligence. That's part of the Sabre mobile app, the web application. The company is able to say there's one answer to everybody who calls up and says, are you open? Government people. We're not talking public here generally. Government people, tell them to go to Sabre. They won't have to call you again. It's going to save time for the company while you're busy trying to get reopened. for the government too, and most importantly, information accuracy and timeliness improves. So with that, let's go live. Demonstration of the food supply chain status reporting here is just an illustration of some of the mobile app capabilities going into emergency operations centers and being shared out through Sabre. We're going to take a look at some of those capabilities, and we'll do that by starting out here with the Sabre website. If you've not been on there, it's the core of your ability to interact with Sabre. Just a quick look at our members in the private sector, the left-hand side, state agencies. There are now more than 30 state agencies, federal, regional. So pretty good list and growing all the time, probably 4 this week. But I now want to enroll. So I'm going to come down to this enroll or ask. Here's a general enrollment, but FMI members have their own special space. So come on over there, and I'm just going to very quickly say my name is Jim, and Sabre is my organization, and Jim at saberspace.org. We'll do that one. And my phone, and want to tell us a little bit about your company. We'd like to know how many stores, states you're located, what your brand names are, so that we start to get an idea right from the beginning. The only thing we ask is that we can use your name on this website, and over here are the information sharing through Sabre terms. They basically say, most fundamentally, and that is, you only give us what you want to give us. You are voluntarily providing this information. We can tell you all the people that are members of Sabre that you just saw. You're responsible for reviewing those. And after that, we can't confirm what they do with the information. And there are some states that actually take the information right off of Sabre, put it onto their public website. So with that, I'm going to submit that. And we get brought over to this page where we've got a little bit of instructions on what you should do. And it highlights again, the objective of FMI and Sabre working together is to create a national view of food availability. Without going through all the instructions there, key button is over here to continue the process. You're going to download the Sabre site. I'm going to open that up. And here is the spreadsheet. And that spreadsheet is in a protected view. I would go off and save that now so that I can begin to add information to it. I'm not going to bother doing that. I've got plenty of those saved on there. Here, this being one of them. So, you're ready to go now. The information that you want to have shown here is going to be contained in these specific columns that allow us to be able to get the key information that we need. Company name, brand name, store name, type, all the things that we talked about earlier. This is the basic stuff that we need. I've got one down here that we have filled out. And this is part of the list that would then actually end up coming to us, coming back to Sabre. So you fill this in and email it back to us. It's all explained. All the information is there about what you're going to get. And I won't bother saving that one either. So that comes to us. We then take it and modify the information to add all of this other information, the status information with the drop-down list, the facility damage, other drop-down lists associated with that. Have you lost stock, lost equipment? Do you need security, structural damage, major structural damage, or other things? Again, this information is the second level of information. First level information is we've now all accomplished that you have this information, and here is the status itself. So all these are open, and we do this to allow you to be able to provide all the information that you need and produce this, enter the information into Saber Space, and then provide this back to you. So think of this as coming back to you, and what we then are building, clean that up a little bit, what we are building is this national view of food information. And here we've got a couple of our members who have come in. We've got these Price Chopper. Here's the information that Price Chopper has provided on those spreadsheets, uploaded into Sabre, and then they are getting back the information that that spreadsheet I just showed. Here's the Claiborne Hill Market. It's part of the Associated Grocers Network. These are all of the people who have so far come in and joined up. So this is the national view, and eventually all of these, we actually just picked up Texas and New Mexico organization yesterday afternoon. The goal now is to create this, which I would describe as the FMI National Visibility, National View of Food Visibility. And we can look at that information in a number of different ways. What we have right there are just the closed ones. We want to add to that, you'll see, we get many more of them up here. These are all the ones that are open. And the open ones now bring together both closed and open, thus providing that view of national food availability. So note, many of these are stores. Some of them are distribution centers, warehouses, other parts of that supply chain. What you want to put in is entirely up to you. So this is the FMI view. That's the second one that we talked about, to be able to provide the kind of information that allows you to bring in the details and show the national visibility to the food supply source. Now, we've got some other things that we need to do, because let's say 2 months have gone by, and what I have here is a problem. And that problem says, I'm out in Colorado, over here in Boulder, and I've got a big snowstorm going on, and we're going to close that store. Let's just close a couple of them here so that they're easy to find and in Colorado, since we don't have any stores there now. So the instructions say, all right, you made your changes here, and I could fill some other stuff in there, but I'm not going to bother. You've made your changes. Now, you have a process to go through. You're going to take that, you're going to save it. And you're going to save it as, and it's the headline says, the instructions are save it as a CSV, which is a different form of an Excel spreadsheet, and you ought to rename it. And I'm going to say that this is, I'll just say it's 9/19/19. Oh, that's interesting. And I'm saving that. It's going to tell you that everything won't be supported, but you expect that. It says it in the instructions, and you close it out. So we have now created this special sheet that has a couple of closed and a bunch of open ones for Lucky Market. I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to come into my member login. I'm Lucky's, and I've closed 2 stores because of a problem. I've got Lucky Markets right there. I'm going to come in, and it would ask you for a password. I've been in here already today, so it's not asking me for a password, but you'll have a password. And over here, here's Lucky's Markets, 9/19/19. There we go. I'm going to take that, and I'm going to click Upload. Upload has been done. So we now have created that. So I'm going to come back here. We're back on the Saber Space website. I'm going to go to the status map, and what I've got is someplace I'm betting out here in Colorado, There are a bunch of the other closed ones that we've seen. And if I come back out to Colorado, yep, we've got a couple out here. One in Boulder and one out there. We've got Lucky's Market, status closed, the address information. Over here, priority needs, they have none. They didn't respond to any of the impact description or opening date or any of those other components that were in there. But everybody knows that Lucky's is now closed. So that's the second one. We've got the first one that we looked at, which was for the FMI. You've got the national view, and this eventually gets filled up. Over here, we have a lesser set. There are only 60 of these things all across the country that are closed, whereas on the other side, there are about 300 total that were there. So for government and those who want to know closed, we have Sabre. FMI will have its own version, just like what you've seen here, that tells them what is going on for the national view that's taking place. And then finally, the last piece that we want to look at is, why does a company want to do this other than being a good citizen? And you can be a good citizen for free. You can be a good citizen and show exactly and let everybody know exactly what you're doing on a business status side. But there are other capabilities here that may help you want to be part of the Sabre with the web app and the mobile application. And here, this is Wakefern, one of our spot-on response Sabre users, and have showing theirs but using a pretend store sitting out here that we're going to, as a different look to it. And this one is, I call it Shopper Place. It's just a pretend. But here, look and see a little bit what an organization can do to more personalize the information, rather than only what is necessary for the status reporting. You can build information. So here I've got things about my facility security and the closest police department, what electrical utilities I'm using. Again, for this pretend store, it's in the parking lot with McDonald's, the police station's part. Whatever information you want to build, you can build this to make this a company or a store system as well. But when that happens, and I say, gee, you know what, that store in fact is going to close, I'm going to want to know a few things about it. And this is one of the advantages of what you can do. You can build a plan around this. So I have a store closing checklist that perhaps is exactly what I want to do, and I'm going to share this with all my stores so they have it in the palm of their hands, on their computers, and in their pockets. And as well, for perhaps first responders, I may very well want to have a floor plan of this facility so that everybody knows exactly what it is that we're seeing at this time and how best to approach that. You can also do real-time information, not to spend too much time on this, but traffic cameras in the neighborhood. Of course, this one's not going to have a live feed. Had it this morning. And other variety of information as well. If I want to see and track hurricane warnings and advisories, for example, if I spin back here a little bit, I'm going to see we've got some coastal activity that's being warned today in that New England area, and probably with that hurricane sitting out there, probably all down the coast. Yep, there you go. So lots of information, but the whole purpose being to be able to say, you know what, I really have this store being closed. So I'm now going to close this store by updating my status. I've got my store to close, save changes, and that quickly I have created a store closure. And let's get rid of all that stuff there. I've created a store closure. You see that it says closed over here. Everybody on this system in the Wakefern network now knows that that store is closed. They're scrolling down the list. It's closed over here. And if we head back now to the national view that we had, where are we here? We want the national view and come into this area. And what we've got, in fact, is going to be one of these guys are now going to be the Shopper Place Revere, and it's closed. So that quickly, and again, remember this was FMI, FMI's national visibility into food availability has now had shared to it the information that that store is closed. So 3 different levels. The first one being that we are able to create this supply chain, as it were, link between grocery stores, food, their distribution sites, and it's an information chain to connect to government. You do that because there are response needs you want to present to government. Sabre Close does that. FMI wants to have a visibility of the whole food supply chain to present to FEMA and others. The FMI Open Closed does that. And you saw an illustration of a company there that gets better in business intelligence, able to share information, understand the plans and the status and all the rest of it in the system, all of which combined, every one of which integrates through Sabre and delivers the total benefit of reducing those gaps that exist out there, overlaps when the public sector comes in, and inconsistencies in the critical information that often cause business and government to be at odds, and both of which need in order to respond and prioritize the appropriate response decisions. So with that, we've come to nearly an end. I'm going to go back to that one slide, though, because there is some fine print that I want you to understand. There's some security and responsibility. First of all, key words over there are you are voluntarily providing this information with the purpose of understanding business impacts or impact of disasters on the business community and helping government do a better job of responding and managing the disaster. There's a responsibility that everybody is expected to handle other members' status data as though it were their own, using similar procedures as you use to protect your own information. Now, we've already said it's voluntary, and we're going to emphasize 10 different times that you only submit the information you want to disclose, but even that is of value and should be subjected to the same procedures as used for handling your own information. Public sectors expected to consume this information for the purpose of managing their disasters. It's not supposed to go out there for other uses. But any consumer has a responsibility to disclose that information, whether it's in their EOC, whether it's out to all the counties, or even, as I mentioned, some states are providing that out to the public. As a result, if you're providing information, you should have no expectation of privacy. Only give us what you already give. And if you look at that information, by and large, it's what you probably have on your website. I mentioned you should look at that, the list of Sabre members, and if there's somebody there that is particularly odious to you, you may either not want to provide information or let us know, and we can make certain that information gets channeled. And then lastly, from a security standpoint, all status company data, it's fully encrypted to federal government information standard processing standards on both the Google and the Amazon cloud, depending on where it's going. Data in transit uses secure HTTPS transmission. It's as good as your banking, basically. So you should have no concerns about the information that you provide. So with that, let me turn it back to Chad for questions, and I'll stop there. Chad, I'll leave this one up.
So we did have a couple
Chad,
of
Doug?
questions. Thank you, Jim. We did have a couple questions that we'll address now.
Hey, so Jim, so a lot of the folks on the phone, we've had at least a couple questions about the same thing, especially from, I never really thought about it, and I know you and I haven't talked about it, so this is a good question, is from a retailer standpoint, especially wholesalers, being able to see upstream in the supply chain as to how their trading partners are doing, is there ever been discussion or current use case where you're having manufacturers put their manufacturing locations in and then update their status? And if not, is that something that Sabre could do?
Definitely we could do. I think that that's a very valuable contribution. The closest we come is in the work we do with a couple of utilities, which I would call upstream, particularly one of them is a water company. So they are providing and able to say, hey, we are having a water outage, which I would think would be similar to having a manufacturing outage. But absolutely, pushing as far back up that supply chain as you are able to lead Sabre to would be much appreciated, and I think a great contribution.
Okay. So more to come for the group on that. And for those of you that didn't see, we will have this webinar. We're currently recording the webinar. So if you're having any kind of audio issues, I know a couple of you were, we'll be providing the link to the webinar. We weren't having audio issues on this end, so we're hoping it's isolated and that the webinar recording will come out clear. We do have another question coming in. And they're typing right now, so we're gonna hang tight here for a minute. All right. So from Daryl, given the initial question on upstream supply chain visibility, how would that get reconciled downstream with retailers? Given the initial upstream supply, how would they get reconciled downstream with retailers? That's so. Are you, Daryl? Are you saying? How would retailers see that on the back end? What would their view be of the screen? I think that's what Daryl's asking, Jim.
I just remembered that I wanted to bring up Google Earth here, and I'll use it to illustrate. Here's that Lucky's that we put in there. But if this were an upstream manufacturer, I would see a couple of different ways that we could do that. One, if they entered into this, the downstream companies that they were providing to, perhaps, or maybe probably better done the other way with the, yeah, I could say if the data were in here, if a retailer were to say, I'm going to have this as my manufacturer, and that information were entered in here, I could see a link that said, okay, manufacturer just went out. Here's the notification to all of the downstream recipients of that product that they're doing. It's not built in, but once the data is in there, these are not difficult things to do. As you see, this is a reasonably sophisticated set of programs that we would be able to extract. And I won't take the time now, but I think that there would be a couple of different ways that we'd be able to provide that.
So they could basically be set up like on a filtering system. You filter based on.
Yeah, I was just thinking, playing through with this. Lots of filtering sources here. If this were the manufacturer, for example, we could go in there and pull out every there we go. Could pull out every downstream person who had entered, I need this manufacturer to be working. By selecting this, we're going to, and I'll just quickly do that.
Hey, Jim, and we lost your screen share.
Oh.
You're back up. You're coming back up.
Okay. All right. Then to just show you, have all these filters, and if this were a if I had the name of the manufacturer in here, and there was a space where everybody entered the manufacturers on whom they were dependent, and if I shifted that from price right to shop right, it's now going to bring up all the shop rights. These would then be all of the stores that were dependent when a manufacturer said, I have a problem. Something along those lines could be done relatively easily just by massaging the data.
Okay.
Good question.
Okay.
Good question.
It looks like our screen issue is Adobe, not you. So potentially, and I think we're talking hypothetically now, but the neat thing is this is the technology, right? So as the new members come on and there's enhancements and ways to improve it, then obviously you're constantly making those upgrades and enhancements to the program.
Yep, that's right. We do it sometimes when someone says we need this, and they contract for it, and we give it to everybody else. Or more often, like the current project we have with the Department of Homeland Security, we're adding some very exciting things.
Yeah, okay. All right, the real opportunity in back to some of Darrell's question and some of the things I've been thinking about is this both from a wholesaler perspective, and the reason why we were so focused with wholesalers today is you know, as independent operators and the distributor to the independent operator, that line of connection with them, it's a little bit more difficult, right? Because you don't have a corporate office who's responsible for 100, 150, 2,400 stores. It's a wholesaler that has a number of customers, individual store customers. So it's gathering that information, and then conversely, it's if the distribution, if the warehouse is down, it's getting that information back out to the retailer as well that the warehouse is down. So can this information flow go both ways? If I'm a wholesaler to an independent operator and I'm actually out of service, can that easily be communicated back out to the retailer too?
Yes, and that's, again, different levels. A spreadsheet upload doesn't do that very well, but that's what we've built the other tools for. So yes, a two-way flow of information, and through the mobile app we even have built it down to the employee who can say whether they're available to come to work. So lots of things there that are maybe worth another webinar if people are interested in.
Okay, and that would be a spot-on response situation.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So, and for those on the phone, I'm glad we're making this distinction because I want you to think about this as a two-part business proposition. Number one was Saber Space, which is a free tool to share your line of sight, share line of sight to public sector, and that's one element. And then the other element was spot-on response is a great way and a very good tool to collect information, to develop that spreadsheet from an independent. But like Jim said, it also it helps independents stay in contact with their associates because it's through an app. Now, if comms are down, if it was, let's say it was Hurricane Michael last year and it took comms down, that poses a little bit of an issue, but you know, everything's going to be down then at that point. but as many rain events as we've been having, and if the hurricane, as an example, is a rain event and comps stay up, like Harvey, retailers were able to stay in contact with their retail corporate offices were able to stay in contact with their stores and their stores with their associates. So if you think from a wholesale perspective, providing a service to an independent, the spot-on response would create that connectivity between the wholesaler to the retailer and then the retailer to the associate of that retailer. That way that independent operator would know where his employees or her employees are at and if they're available, if they're safe, if they can come to the store, so it opens up that line of communication. So that's part 2 of this, and as you hopefully more of you talk to Jim about Saber Space, then you also look into that spot-on response and the services that provides to extend that that connection with your customers and with their employees. So I appreciate you. We're coming to the top of the hour, so really appreciate, Jim, you coming on and walking us through this. It's a little bit technical, but it's really important to understand the back end of this and how this works. And again, I would say very importantly is you as the owner of the data, you control what is shared, right? So the privacy of that is something that you set up early on with Saberspace. What information is shared, and then on the back end, the public sector is only pulling that information that you say is okay to